Okay, everyone, we'll get going here. So again, I'm Ian from Userscape. I'm going to go through the advanced topics session here today. Um, so we're going to jump around quite a bit. It's done somewhat under the assumption that you are familiar with kind of the basic use and administration of HelpSpot. So what I like to do here is just point out some of the settings and features that maybe you haven't had a chance to explore as much, and introduce a few new ways you might use some of the specific tools. And then also, since we just released HelpSpot 4.5, we'll talk a little bit about a few of the key changes, especially some of the reporting changes. So we'll go through that a bit. And then we'll also take any questions you have. So if there's anything you want to cover, it can be anything at all. We'll cover that at the end, and you can either put those questions in as we go into the question box on the GoToWebinar system, or at the end you can put them in as well. Okay. So I just want to point out here that we do have just what we call like testing data in here. So it's actually from Alice in Wonderland. Just use that to build out a couple thousand requests in this training installation so that there's some data in here. Okay, so I'll start with a few settings. Let me get my desktop organized. Okay, I'm gonna go over to admin and down here to settings. So there's a whole bunch of settings, obviously, in HelpSpot. Most of them, have pretty sensible defaults, but there's a few that sometimes people miss that I like to point out. First is the default history search. So what this does is over here on the request screen, if you're searching for the history on the current customer, it's going to default to this kind of what we call general search, which usually does a pretty good job of picking up any requests from this existing customer. But in some use cases, you might want a little bit of a different default search there. So instead of the general search, perhaps you just always definitely want it to match on email address, or more likely, because general search kind of works this way by default, you want to do a customer ID match instead. So what this would let you do is if you work with people from the same organization, but different people from that organization, in some cases, you might want to see the history of everyone from the whole organization and not just that specific person you're dealing with. So in that case, the customer ID match can be good since you'll then get the history of that whole organization instead of just that person. And if you don't use customer IDs, you don't track your HelpSpot requests using a unique customer ID, then an alternative, which is pretty effective, is the email domain match. So this would then just use the domain part of the email, which most of the time will be consistent across everyone in a particular organization. So that can be really handy. Obviously, if you deal more with end consumers, that's not going to be that useful to you because you'll get a whole bunch of Gmail and Yahoo and so on. But if you're primarily working with companies, then that could be a really handy option, especially if you don't use customer ID. And if you do use customer ID, you might want to default to that instead. Okay, one couple other things down here. The filters by default will show 50 requests at a time, but you can increase this or decrease it, so just to be aware of that. And also, this is a little bit of a tricky setting sometimes that stumps people. Filter within previous days. So now this is going to apply more to you longtime HelpSpot customers. But even if you're new to the system, this will eventually potentially impact you. And what this does is it attempts to kind of limit the scope of your filters so that they don't become unruly. So sometimes people will define filters and they'll leave them very broadly defined. And what happens is if you have a 5-year-old HelpSpot installation with 500,000 requests, they could define it so broadly as to return, 100,000 results, and that's not really optimal. And so this attempts to kind of limit the scope of that to the last year, so that the filters are by default limited to 1 year in their backwards looking. It'll limit them to 1 year of time. Now, you can adjust the amount of time here, which is what the setting's for, or you can keep it unlimited by just hitting it to 0, in which case it won't restrict anything. This will only impact when you don't provide your own time range. So if you do provide your own time range, this would not come into play. But if you don't, then this setting would by default limit the view of the filters to the last year, just to kind of keep their scope from pulling in very old things. Okay, let's jump over to email integration here. So there's a lot of settings having to do with email, of course. Here's one that can be handy for some folks. It's called the global BCC. And what this does is when HelpSpot sends email out of the system, if you want to add a BCC, a regular email BCC, to the emails that leave HelpSpot, then this lets you do that. So kind of the most common scenario with this is you might want to archive all the outbound email for regulatory purposes or other purposes in your mail server. So it's of course in HelpSpot, but you also want to have that archived somewhere else. Then you could add this global BCC. So I could do something like this, and that outbound email would go to this address as well. And there's an option here, so you can have it be only the public notes. So these will always be in HelpSpot, but if you do want to back them up somewhere else, you can. Or you can have all outbound email. And all outbound email can be handy, especially if it's more of a regulatory thing, because one thing HelpSpot doesn't store in the sense of the original email is notification emails. So if it's just sending a notification, that's not in your request history, for example. That's not stored as a complete email anywhere in HelpSpot, since it's just a notification to the staff people. But in some organizations, they want to also have a copy of all those as well. So with this setting, you could do that, and every single email sent out of the system would be in that, BCC'd to this backup account. So that can definitely be handy. Reopening closed requests before. So by default, HelpSpot will reopen a request that's already been closed if the customer updates that request. So the default amount, as we see here, is 30 days. So basically, if the customer replies within 30 days, it will reopen the requests, and it'll appear back in the assigned users My Queue, or it'll go back to the inbox. But you might know in your use case that you don't need that much time. Like if they don't reopen it within the first few days, then that's probably that issue's resolved, and what they're really doing is contacting you with a new issue. And so you want to lower that time frame so that if they reply, it won't reopen, but it will instead create a new request. And if that happens in error, you can always merge it back to the original. So you want to kind of get this setting dialed in to the point where it's right for your organization, where you're not having people reopening requests that have been closed with new issues, and you want those to become new issues instead. Also in here, you can set it to always reopen, so you don't care how long it is. Always reopen it, or never reopen. When you close it, it is closed, never to be reopened by the customer. So that's another option there as well. A couple items just to touch on with the spam filter. So by default, HelpSpot's spam filter is enabled, and it's a learning spam filter. You don't have to do anything in particular. As you close requests or as you mark them as spam, it's learning from that and getting better. If you really don't need the spam filter, like you already have a spam filter in front of HelpSpot that does a really great job, or you just want to make sure nothing ever goes to spam, you can actually turn this off, and then there's no chance anything of going off into the spam filter accidentally. There's also this in-between option, which is on for checking but doesn't train the filter anymore. So this can be handy if you get your spam filter trained really nicely and you don't want to mess with it. It's like perfect. Then you can leave it on for checking but no training. That also helps speed up HelpSpot a little bit. Not really for the interface, so you wouldn't see a lot of difference in that regard, but more for kind of a server load issue on when you're pulling in requests. Not usually too huge a deal for that, but it does limit the server's impact a little bit. There's also whitelists and blacklists, so this can be handy as well if we want to just say, everyone at Userscape, we know always whitelisted so that there's no chance they accidentally go off into spam or anything like that. Or right, we know everybody from this domain is something we want to filter off as a blacklist. We can do that. Okay, so let's jump over to the email templates. So over here in customization, we have the email templates here. And so I want to talk about a different way to use these. So the purpose of the email templates is to allow you to customize the outbound emails from HelpSpot. So you can customize their design and how they look, which is all great. So the one you're in most of the time is going to be public notes to customers. And so we see here we can fully modify the email itself. So this is the message that you write in the note box that'll be put into this spot here. But we can adjust any of the colors or add in different things here. And there's an HTML version and a text version, both of which you need to adjust, as well as you can control the subject line as well. So that's great. I'm not going to go too much into that customization of it, although you can definitely do that. But what I want to talk about here is using these templates for something else, which is to kind of build a central spot for your signatures so that you don't have to have your agents setting up a signature on their own. Either they won't need a signature at all on their own, or they can just put in their personal information into that signature, like their name and like their particular contact phone number or something like that. But they can leave off all the more general items you might have in a signature, so that those can be just controlled in one spot, and you won't need to tell everybody to update their signatures if something changes or your address changes, or you want to add a link in all the signatures to the HelpSpot portal or to someplace else. You don't have to go through with 30 people and make sure they update that correctly. You can control it from this central spot. So we could just do something simple, like I'm going to set up a new paragraph, so just a little HTML here. And let's say we didn't want them to have signatures at all. We could put in the assigned staff person's name, for example. Maybe we just want to have their first name, and we're going to have their phone number. And then I'll put a break in here, and then put Userscape Inc. And then I want to have, so I'm going to put a link in here. Okay, so I could do that. Okay, so now I just built this simple signature that's going to go out in every email to customers automatically, and there's nothing that the staff need to do. And if I need to change anything here, I want to add some more links, or the phone number changes, or whatever the case may be, I could make those adjustments. I'd also need to do this in the text version as well, so I would do the same thing here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I would just go through this. Oops, not the customer. So the assigned person's name. Okay, so I would just go through that and put whatever I need in both the text and HTML versions. Since these are both sent in every email to a customer, there's an HTML version and a text version of all the text, so that no matter what email client they're using, they see your message. So we would need to make that adjustment in both spots. But now it's all centralized. If we wanted to, if this in your organization is specific to the person, we could leave this part out. and we could just have the company information here. Doing it in here also removes it from your request history. If you have your agents doing their own signatures now, you'll see that their signatures are always part of the request history of the message, which can get a little it just takes vertical space and can, it's kind of duplicative because you don't need to see that every time. But since it's something the agents can adjust themselves, we do log it with the request history so that it's documented what was actually sent. But if you do it here in the email templates, the template as a whole is not saved in the database, so it won't show in the history. So that can be nice as well to not see your company name over and over and over and over and over in every history item. You just have it centralized here in the signature, which is centralized in the email template. And one other thing about the email template, so this right here, what we're looking at, it is the default email template that will be used unless otherwise specified. But you can override this on a per mailbox basis. So in each of your email boxes, we could go in here, and if we have multiple brands, for example, or even if we just have different departments that want to have different signatures or different customizations to their emails, that can be done on a per mailbox basis, so that I can edit the public notes to customers just for this brand. And I'm going to populate it just to get us started. And then from here, we could go through and put our customization in here. And so if you deal with multiple brands, which is the most common example, you could have that brand's name, obviously, its own phone number, its own link to its own, portal or other documentation and things you might want to link to from the signature. So very handy if you do need to separate between brands or departments or things like that. Okay. On to some more advanced stuff here. I want to take a look at triggers. So triggers let you watch the system in real time, and as requests are created or updated, the triggers will be watching, and if they match a certain set of conditions that you've specified, will execute different actions. So here we have a trigger, and we could do something like when a request is created, maybe we want to do something special in that case. So the request is open, and if the body of the message contains a certain bit of text, or it's from a certain customer, or it's got a certain category or so on, maybe it's from a particular mailbox and has a certain something in the body. Let's just say the body contains, maybe you're looking for something from a particular system that in the body puts something like this. Okay, so we can watch for that. And then we can do different actions. We could set a custom field based on that, set an assigned user, send a notification to a particular staff member, all those kind of things. So what I want to show is a couple of new options you can do here. So that's all been existing. But in HelpSpot 4, we introduced this concept called the webhooks. So webhooks let you integrate HelpSpot with other systems and do it in real time. So I don't want to get too technical with this, but mostly just to let you know it's possible that you could say under this scenario, what I want to do is I'm going to have a little script that our team, your developers write, or our professional services team could write. And right, so maybe we're going to have a script that logs these errors in your bug tracker, and that'll all happen in real time. So we could have the email comes in, the HelpSpot trigger runs, it sees this error, and it calls this script, which will log it in your bug tracker, for example. The script could do anything at all. It could send emails, it could update a database somewhere, it could do anything you want it to do. But this really allows for tight real-time integration, which is really handy. Another thing I want to show is Many of you are likely using Live Lookup. If you're not, Live Lookup is an API we have that lets you connect HelpSpot to your other data systems so that you can view request or customer information from those other systems. So from a CRM tool or Active Directory or anything like that. It's a tab right here. We can see that that information here. So this would be coming directly out of a CRM or Active Directory or a database or SaaS app, whatever it is. It would make sense to connect to look up information on your customers. Now, by default, this just happens when the agent clicks this button, and it'll connect to that system, and it'll show us information about the person. But we can do something a little bit cooler with triggers, which is to say when a request is created, so it's going to be open, so we don't let them do anything else. Every time a request is created, we want the action to be to run a live lookup. And here would be a list of your different live lookup options. So you pick one. What this does is it populates the request details with the customer's information as soon as the request is created. So it's as soon as the request comes in, the email comes in. It could be from a portal or email or however, even manually entered. HelpSpot's going to check against Live Lookup, against your basically customer data systems, and say, okay, do we know who this person is? If Live Lookup returns a result that we do know who it is, then it will populate the customer's information. If there's any custom fields that you want populated, those could be populated. So all that would be populated instantly as soon as the request is created. And that has a few nice advantages. First is that and kind of secondary really is that agents don't have to click this button and look this stuff up manually and insert it. So that'll be done for them, that step. But even better is that since all that information is populated instantly, all your filters will take that data into account. So that if you have filters that say look for requests from a certain company and treat those special, right away we would know who the company is. That would be logged in their customer ID because that would be set from Live Lookup automatically on request creation. Or maybe you have a custom field, for example, that manages plan types. So it manages, if they're a gold plan or a silver plan or a bronze plan. Rather than an agent having to come in here and look that up and set that custom field value, it would already be set. And so our filters would instantly work to show us, the gold priority support customers. And we'd already know that before we even went through the inbox and figured it all out. They'd already matched that filter. So a really handy time saver, makes the filters a lot more powerful since they'll work right from the beginning instead of waiting for an agent to categorize and things. So definitely a handy thing, especially if you use Live Lookup already, that you'll probably want to take a look at. Okay, so let me get a couple notes here. Oh, I do see a hand raised, but I'll take all the questions at the end, and we'll cover that. Or you can put a question in the question box now while we're going through, and I will look at those at the end. Okay, so I just want to touch on a few of the new HelpSpot 4.5 features, and there's quite a number of them. So first is integrations with a tool called Zapier. So if you don't know about Zapier, it's a service that's really extremely affordable that lets you connect HelpSpot to really almost any other application out there. So, maybe just as a simple example, every time you get a support request, you want to add that person to a list in MailChimp so that they're on your list of people who've contacted support, and that you're going to survey them, every 6 months to see how things are going and how they like support. That you could do that instantly and easily with no programming required. It's all just visually done. Maybe you want to log them all in a Google spreadsheet, for example, or maybe you want to do kind of the reverse, which is when something happens in another system, create a request in HelpSpot. You could do that. You can do things like notify your team if you use something like Slack or HipChat, if you're a remote team maybe, which is what we use here. There's a tool called Slack, which is like a chat application. And you can have HelpSpot notify Slack when there's either new requests or maybe you want to have it be under a certain set of conditions that Slack would get a notification in a channel that, there's a priority request or something like that. All that, again, easily possible without any programming. So you definitely want to check out Zapier. It's at zapier.com. It is linked from this integrations tab here in HelpSpot 4.5. We're still actually betaing this, so if you are interested in it, just let us know and we will send you a link to be part of the beta. So this is still in process. So all the functionality is there, but we're just getting it kind of fleshed out since we launched this just with the release of 4.5 last week. So just let us know. Just contact support, and we can get you hooked up with the Zapier connection to our HelpSpot account in Zapier, and you'll be able to make those what they call zaps, connecting all the different systems. So really, really cool, really easy to do. Okay, so much to show you in 4.5, but a couple things over in the request screen. I can show you kind of two at once here with the ability to now drag and drop files, as well as the ability to see the actual images you're dealing with in the WYSIWYG editor here. So it's a 1984 ad from Apple here. And we could then work with this image right here, so on and so forth. So instead of just having these little placeholders like we used to have, now you can see the actual image, which is obviously much nicer, and you can make sure that's the proper image that you actually want to show there, all those kind of things. And you can manually do it still with attaching, but now you can also drag and drop right into here, which is really nice. We can also, let me see, here's another big one that people are really loving. It's one of these little features that's really very handy. Now the ability to pin a request history item. And so it's really, a simple concept. We can just pin this here and it moves to the top and it will stay at the top. So what's nice about that is, let's just refresh the page. We see it's still pinned. So this is really great for those emails or even history notes you add yourself that have some really critical piece of information. So maybe it's access to a system that you need as part of the core of answering this request, or maybe it's some bit of information the customer has sent that's really critical that you don't want to make sure nobody misses. It can just be pinned, and now it'll be at the top, and so it basically can't be missed because it's right there. This also works with private notes, so you can pin private notes as well. So really handy from a management perspective if you want to leave a note on how to handle a certain issue or something like that, and you want to make sure it's seen by the agent. You can add your private note and then pin it, and it'll just be right there at the top. So no matter how long that request goes on, your important details are not going to be lost farther down. They'll always be right at the top. And you can also pin multiple. So if you pin a private note, but you also have the public note you pinned, they'd both be here at the top. So you can pin more than one, so that if there's maybe a note from a manager that needs to be pinned, but also a bit of information the customer sent that's really important, they can both be pinned and available. Okay, what do I cover? Well, all right, let's cover two more things. Well, three more things. All right, so under custom fields, this is a cool little thing with your drop-down lists now. They can be color-coded. So if you want to say, I'm just going to use, I'll use priority. So you have a priority field. So nothing will change with these by default, but if we go here, we can color code them. And dial in just the right color, okay. I'll just make this always visible. And so now in our filters, I'm going to edit this filter to add the priority. So I'm just going to add this column. And then I can, I'm just going to make a few of these high priority here. Okay. Boom. So there we go. We can clearly see those. I'll make a few medium just for contrast here. Okay, so those really stand out, and it's just a great way to highlight, any priority column or any custom field that's a predefined list type can have this highlighting. So a really handy way to just call attention to those. And you don't need to have every item in the predefined list to have a color either. So we could have left this where only high had a color and medium and low were just normal text, and that would be just fine as well. So I think that's a really great feature. And you have multiple columns that use this as well. So if you do have multiple predefined lists where you want to have this highlighting, you can do that. And then finally, I want to just cover the two new big reports we have. So the productivity overview report is a pretty cool report. This gives us one screen to look at first response speed and resolution speed together. But more than that, so this data is always available under analysis, so first response speed and resolution speed. But in those reports, it doesn't aggregate them in a way that's kind of useful for the kind of quick eyeballing and comparison over time quite as easily. So what this report does is it groups them into these tracks. And so for first response speed, for example, here we see 42% of our first responses are in less than 15 minutes. And then, 1% are 15 to 30 and 3% are 30 to 60 and so on. It goes down through. So we can kind of keep an eye on how long is it taking us to initially reply. We can also visually see if there's any obvious changes. So here we see over the past 4 months, the green kind of area is increasing, which is what we'd want to see because we are responding to more and more requests in under 15 minutes. So we can look for that. On the flip side, we also want to keep an eye on this red at the bottom, right? Like how many are taking more than 12 hours. So we can keep an eye on that and just quickly see if that's growing or shrinking. And same thing for resolution speed. So the speed as a whole, how many are we closing out in under an hour and 1 to 3 hours and 3 to 6 hours and so on. We can now see all that again easily visually, kind of see if there's increases or decreases there in the different groupings. And we can also, of course, access the raw data here as well and export those. So a really nice report just for keeping an eye on kind of how efficiently you're able to deal with requests. And this can also be filtered down, I should mention too. So if you want to see the same data, but only for a certain category or something like that, you could do that. The other item, the other new report is the comparison matrix. And this gives us an ability that we've never had before in HelpSpot, which is to compare pretty much anything to anything else, which is really handy. So here, and just to see it in a very efficient display of a lot of information. So what we're looking at here is a simple example of all the categories across every day for the last 2 weeks. So we're able to see hotspots For example, human resources and hardware and maintenance had some hotspots on Sunday, for example. So being able to spot trends and things is so much easier with this, because we can see all the categories at once across a time period and group together. So really nice. We could do things like a whole month, for example, or a whole year, and kind of see bigger trends over longer terms. And then also, so this is all still kind of time related, uh, which is a very common use case, and I think will be really great for trending and things. But we can also adjust the axes here, so we can have um, time on the y-axis if we preferred, along with all these different other options for the y-axis, and then we can also control the x-axis. So let's say we want to see, rather than along a time continuum here, we want to have the statuses down here. So let's try that. Okay, so what this is showing us is the intersections here are the categories and their current status. So there's 21 server issues currently with the status of problem solved in this overarching date range of the past 2 weeks. There's 3 customer found solutions who were having upgrade issues. There's 4 customer found solutions who are having maintenance issues. So we can start to compare these against each other and see, again, trending and just understanding about where requests are in certain categories. In this case, we could do the same for like our new priority custom field here can be one of the axes. So I only put a few requests in that, but we could see 3 medium in general sales, 4 high priority in general sales, for example. We could do this by mailboxes or by the portal the request came in on, or by who's assigned. So this would be a handy one. Let's do that. Okay, so the number of, so Ian here, it's me. You can see all the requests assigned to me by their categories. So just in one spot, I can see this for the entire staff, who's working on what in terms of categorization of requests, really simply all on one screen, just really, really nice and simple to use. And this can also be filtered down. So we could filter this on any of the filter conditions that are possible in the filtering system. It's exportable. So you can work with this data, in Excel or numbers or whatever the case may be. And then we can also just access the raw data here as well. And in this UI, we also get totals, which is kind of handy. So the matrix report, really cool. I think there's going to be a lot of valuable information that you'll be able to uncover with that as you really dig in there and are able to keep an eye on trends more efficiently and just get a better view of kind of the situation on the support team by being able to do these comparisons, especially across custom field values and the categories, and even the category, I didn't mention this, the category reporting tags as well, so they can be one of the axes as well, which is really cool. So a lot can be done there. All right, so I'm going to leave it there. Leave us a little bit of time here to go through. I see we have some questions stacked up. Okay. So is there a way to, and these questions can be on anything, so it doesn't have to be on anything I've shown you. Just so feel free, if you have other questions just on anything at all, go ahead and pop them into the question queue, and I will be happy to answer those. But I have a few from Jeff here, so I'm going to go through Jeff's first. Is there a way to automatically delete all spam within the admin settings rather than running a script on the back end, which is another way to do it? So there is not a way to, there's not a button to delete all spam directly. You have to go through and kind of check it off. I don't think I have any spam in here, but so you would mark them and delete spam. So this works pretty well, but if you have a busy installation, I happen to know Jeff, and they have a very large HelpSpot installation, so there's a lot of spam in there. And so for that, it is more time consuming. So what you can do with that is, I would recommend usually there's two kind of different options. One is some organizations will actually not use the HelpSpot spam filter and just use a spam filter in front of HelpSpot and just get those tuned up and just not have the spam come into HelpSpot at all. The other thing would be to put that script. So there is a command line script that can delete all the spam. That's built in the HelpSpot. It's a command you give HelpSpot from the command line. So that script could be set to run like Sunday night, or once a week. I wouldn't necessarily run it every day, but the idea being, if you run it once a week, then what you could do is just have kind of a policy that you're going to charge someone or a few people with, checking the spam queue maybe on Friday afternoon. They check it and make sure there's no real requests that happen to get in there. And then this way it'll auto delete, maybe Friday night, then you have it just automatically be deleted, something like that. Or even Friday morning and you check it Thursday night, whatever. It doesn't really matter what time it is. But the idea being, you could automate the deletion of it with the script, but just have a person go through and make sure there's nothing, that accidentally made its way in there. That, because you wouldn't want that deleted as spam, because obviously then you won't be able to answer that person. Also, it will train the system that email that was actually good is not good. So there's a few things you want to be careful with that. Is there a way to default a specific live lookup search type from the dropdown using a trigger? So we default a specific live lookup search type from the dropdown using a trigger. I'm not sure I follow 100% with the, you do select the live lookup. So you build the trigger condition, and then as the action is perform a live lookup with, you would set which of your live lookup scripts are used here. So that would be, if you needed different ones in different scenarios, you would have a different trigger for each of those scenarios. So post another question in there if that's not accurate or not what you were looking for, but that's what I think you mean. Is there a way to listen to audio files from within HelpSpot? In certain browsers, there definitely there is it does show the audio player, HTML5 audio player, but it does depend on the audio file type as well as your browser. So there's a few limitations there. But off the top of my head, trying to remember, I don't recall the exact details of those limitations, but I will take a look and see what's going on with that and get that information over to you. Just take a note on that. Okay. Yeah, so for voicemails and other things, for sure, it's definitely nice to have the audio player there, and it does under most circumstances. But I will take a look at the exact details there and get back to you on that. Is there a way to drill down to the requests that are taking more than 12 hours in the first response speed report? So currently, there's not a drill down through there. So meaning in this report, there's not a drill down to the ones that are in that over 12-hour block. Let me think about that for a second. Yeah, right now there's not a way. The way these reports, the aggregation of them is a little bit tricky to put back into a filter, but that is definitely something we would like to add, because obviously it would make sense to be able to click that from there and see it. So on the list, but not currently possible. Okay, let me see. Okay, yeah, there was a Shannon. You had your hand raised. I can open you up here to speak if you have a question. Your mic is open, Shannon. I know you raised your hand a while ago, but if you did want to chat, just chime in. Okay. Oh, sounds like we lost the screen, but I've hopefully returned it there. There we go. Sorry about that. Thanks for the note, Brian. I don't know why it did that, but it turned off my screen there, but we're back. Okay. Other questions? Looks like we might be all set. All right. Well, thanks everybody for taking 45 minutes here to take a look at some of the new features and hopefully get a bit more out of the some of those lesser known settings and things. If there's any other questions you have, definitely contact our support team and we can get back to you on that. And thanks for using HelpSpot as always. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks a lot.